This Final Cut Pro 10 Tour presentation is brought to you by the LumaForge Share Station, the world's best storage for Final Cut 10. For more information on how the Share Station can improve your workflow, head on over to lumaforge.com.
I'm going to basically walk through just some real-world best practices on how to get to and from Resolve, because it really is, on the XML side, if you take advantage of a few things, rock solid at this point. So I've had a really good experience.
I'll let you go ahead. Give an applause to Sam Mestman.
So just a quick show of hands. How many of you guys have actually sent something to and from Resolve from Final Cut at this point? We got a few. How many of you guys had a good experience where everything worked exactly the way you wanted it to? All right, 0, not one person. I feel like that's the general sort of rule. I just went through, we just did a 6K Red Raw and 5K Epic pilot that we cut the whole way through in Final Cut, that then went out to Resolve, and in general went really well. Certainly this has been significantly better than Resolve 11. The new version of Resolve 12.5 fixed a lot of XML things. There are a few things that if I could go back in time on this pilot, I would do a little bit differently, and I'm going to show you guys some of those. But basically, the key thing is hopefully you'll come away from like the next 15, 20 minutes with like an idea that like if you do a few things, this is going to work on a narrative workflow. So we're going to use pretty much, I'm going to show you exactly what I did and how this worked. And, you know, if you guys have anything, any serious questions, just stop me right in the middle and I'll quickly answer for you. But I'm going to sort of walk you through some overall do's and don'ts. And we're going to start, and actually, oh, we have the timeline. So this is the picture lock version of my TV pilot. I think we've got most of the clips here. We might be missing a couple things. But in general, this is all 6K Red Raw. A lot of it's multicam. And basically, this is narrative. We did all of this using ShotNotes X. And essentially, you'll be seeing more about this workflow probably in a couple presentations in a couple months. But the long and story short is this is a full-on TV pilot workflow that was shot, and this is, you can completely 100% do this, and it's not a big deal. But we're here to talk about Resolve and specifically conforming and getting into Resolve. Rory's going to show you some pretty amazing things on the Resolve side. But there are some things before you get there from Final Cut that you're going to want to know to improve your life. And a few things in the timeline, what I recommend you do when you finish, in case you screw anything up, which I do frequently, is duplicate your finished timeline. And make sure you, instead of, a lot of people use snapshots. I recommend you actually use the duplicate function, because snapshots are going to make unique instances of your multicam or compound clips, which will not, if you duplicate a snapshot, you're going to get frozen in time. If you duplicate as a project, you can make changes to your multicam and compound clips, and those are still going to ripple through, and you're not going to see duplicate clips. So I recommend you use the duplicate function unless you specifically want to be able to get back to a point in time no matter what. Now, I have this, we've duplicated this, and this is going to be the timeline that we're going to use to do a quick conform. I've already gotten through the later stages, so I may skip ahead for time reasons, but we're going to walk through some of the basic things you should do to your Resolve timeline for a positive experience. The first thing you're going to want to do is I recommend you finalize any auditions, and at least on the video side. And you're also going to want to break apart any compound clips that have a lot of graded material in them. So for instance, if you've broken stuff into scenes or things along those lines that have video, you can use compound clips in Resolve, but you are going to need to use additional open and timeline commands, and it can start getting confusing. So the more you can break down your clips to the core level, the happier you're going to be. And the other big thing that's probably going to make your life a little bit easier, at this point I'm still not particularly happy with how Resolve handles audio. It can also create a little confusion in your XML. So the thing that I recommend you sort of do is use the timeline index. This can save you a ton of time, and basically it is like a conform weapon. So a lot of times you're going to have all selected. The first thing you're going to do is open up the timeline index and notice, you know, the idea here is we're going to detach all of our audio. So I'm going to go and select video in the timeline index, and then I'm going to go to the top level here and I'm going to shift select all the way down, and I'm going to select all of my video clips, push Command 2, and now if I go and Control click and detach audio, this is not going to work. And the reason it's not going to work is because you can't detach audio from compound clips. This is one of the things that I figured out the hard way. So when you decide to do this trick, what I actually recommend you do is go through all of these icons and learn what the compound clip icon looks like. And when you decide that you want to shift select all of this, go Command 2, and then you're going to want to remember what your detach audio keyboard shortcut is, which is Control Shift S, and then you're going to see all of your audio detached there, and you're going to go through and go down to the next compound clip, Control Shift S. Okay, so basically the long story short is once that's done, you're going to go over to your audio tab here and select all there, Command 2. Remember that as you're flipping between the timeline index, because in the timeline index you're not going to be selected. In fact, I'll just go ahead and show you what happens if I do this. So notice that these are in white when I select them on the side. When I push delete, nothing happens. Oh, did they fix that? Look at that. All right. Well, that didn't used to work. Now it does, so that's exciting. We learn something new every day here. So basically, now if you were to go through, you can quickly delete out all of the audio. This is going to clear up things that can go wrong as you go into Resolve. Really the goal is to minimize the amount of things that can go wrong over XML so that you're bringing something in, it's going to be extremely clean. There is also, this is a public service announcement. How many of you guys use Sync and Link or, okay. So there is a trick that going to Resolve, there's a bit of a bug with Sync and Link created clips. What you're going to want to do with the Sync and Link clip is copy and paste it, or copy and paste your timeline into a new timeline. And it's going to give you some of these little one-frame gap clips. Basically, then you can go and search for gap clips and delete out all of these one-frame gap clips, and then send it to Resolve from there. So if you're using Sync and Link, if you guys have any questions about it, it's going to take a little bit too much time to show you. Make sure if you're using Sync and Link to copy and paste your Final Cut timeline into a new timeline before going to Resolve. You're going to see some weird little gap clips in your timeline. Delete those. Once you've done that, it'll now get into Resolve the way that you want it to. This is a bug that will save you probably days of your life trying to figure out why your timeline is off in Resolve. Just copy and paste into a new timeline. It's going to fix it. From there, a big thing, how many of you guys use multicam and synchronized clips? Pretty much everybody who's doing this. If I could go back in time and change one thing about my workflow, it would be from the very beginning setting all of my clips to fill upon import. Because especially if you're using high resolution or red raw or things along those lines, those are going to come in as 6K files. Those are not standard delivery resolutions. You're probably going to be conforming into a 4K or 1080 timeline with these clips, which means that you're going to probably be using Spatial Conform in some capacity. And so what I'm going to show you now is these are the actual clips that I used. So all of my clips came in like this. So this is a multicam clip after I'd made it. I didn't set my spatial conform to fill. And if you notice now I'm in a 4K timeline and I have these little top and bottom things. And ordinarily this is extremely easy to fix. I would just simply go to fill and that's going to work just fine. And it does work. And you can even do this across multiple clips in your timeline, etc. The problem is with synchronized and multicam clips is when you go inside them and I select it, this is still set to fit. This is going to bite you later in the resolve process as I'm going to show you. So instead, what I recommend is I brought in some test clips here that have not been turned into multicam clips. And I'm just going to walk you through exactly what we've got here. So we have, this is how I edited this pilot prior to going into resolve, is all of them look like this. And then I set them to fill in the timeline. You know, I just went across because I forgot to do it prior to editing them in the timeline. And this is a synchronized clip that is the same thing. This is a unique thing about synchronized clips that's a little bit annoying, is I've set this to fill, but it's not here. So if you've made a synchronized clip and you haven't set the clips inside the synchronized clip to fill, you're going to have to go open all of these in timeline once you've done your edit, select this clip, and set it to fill, and come back. This is annoying. So what I'd say is when you bring in all of your media as part of your assistant edit process is set all of the clips to fill. So by default, and I've done this already, by default, all of these are set to fit. I brought these in. When you import, go and quickly on any of the dailies process, set everything to fill, and then go ahead and start making these synchronized and multicam clips. So I'm just going to start off first by making a multicam clip. Select this clip and this clip. I now have this multicam clip, and if you notice, I have no black bars on the top or bottom. And yet, on the video side, this is still set to fit. And the reason for this is because I've set the clips inside the angle to fill, which means when they appear in my timeline, it respects the clip's spatial conform data that's inside the angle. So you may have gone through and do what I did, which is set all of my clips in the timeline so that the spatial conform was right on multicam by selecting the clips in the timeline. But because I didn't do that on the clip level itself in the browser, when I'm going to get into resolve, it's all going to go away, which can be a really lengthy process if you've got a long feature or something along those lines. Changes you make to clips when you open them in the timeline inside a sequence are not respected in the browser. So I can do it from the clip inside the timeline, and then when I go back into the browser, even if I go back here and I put this at the end of the timeline, I'm going to have to keep doing the same thing till the end of time unless I set it from the very beginning for it to be on fill. Does this make sense to everybody? I realize this is a little bit confusing, but it will save you just an endless amount of time. I literally had to do this. My entire edit was go and change the spatial conform, and then I had to do it again in resolve once I got there. So set everything to fill from the very beginning. It's going to save you through the entire process and save you a ton of aggravation. So this is basically the way that you should do it. And we're going to go quickly make an XML and bring this into resolve, and you can sort of see what this process is going to be like. Going to save you an epic amount of time. So we'll go and put this into we'll put it on the share station and new folder, call it XML. Okay, and click save. Now the nice part about this is that when you go into DaVinci, there are a lot fewer bugs in the new version that there used to be. So if you were doing Final Cut 10 round trip workflow in Resolve prior to this, there were a lot of weird little bugs. They really cleared a lot of this stuff out. I could go through and talk about all the things that are going to come in and not come in. But for the most part, Your speed changes are going to come in, and especially like standard speed changes where you're not doing any, when you blade speed and things along those lines, it's going to be iffy. So you're going to want to test some of these renders. But really the best thing you can do is, if you're really worried about something coming in, just render it out as its own clip, and you can bring it back into your Final Cut timeline and then send that through as part of your XML. So you can always bake in some of these effects if you're going to do it that way. Or you can try it, and for the most part, they're going to come through. But if you have a problem in the round trip, because Resolve is such a good conform tool and they've added these editing tools, it's very easy to go and update something and send through a new XML to come into Final Cut. How many of you guys are familiar with remote grading in Resolve? Okay. Have you guys ever color corrected an angle in Final Cut on multicam? You notice that those changes ripple through the timeline? That's what remote grading in Resolve is. By default, this is disabled, because they felt like, I think it was, the official explanation was they felt it was too confusing a concept. But you can turn this back on really easily in Resolve. By default, this is checked, which is use local version for new clips in timeline. Simply deselect this, and that's going to enable remote grading, which is going to allow, basically grades that you make to sort of ripple through other similar clips in the timeline. So I recommend you do that by default. Additionally, you're going to want to turn on your autosave, and you need to save your project first. So that's a little tip. So go ahead. The first thing you should do is save your project and do that. The other thing I recommend that you do is set your timeline resolution to whatever the timeline is going to be. But that is less important because we're about to bring in an XML that's going to basically show you how to do this. So let's go ahead and just do that. I haven't brought any media in, but I'm going to go to the edit page and go to import XML here. And okay, so you're going to want to automatically set the project settings. You're going to, if you haven't brought in, if you're not relinking to original media, you're going to want it to automatically import source clips. So if you're working from dailies, deselect this and bring in your clips into the media pool. But in this scenario, I'm working from my originals, so this is just going to be easier, and it's going to automatically import my clips into the media pool. Use sizing information. I don't recommend you use color information because I found that a lot of the grades are not accurate as they come in from Final Cut. So I prefer to start over, but try it. If it works for you, keep it. For me, I haven't had as much success. And it's going to automatically set my timeline resolution to whatever I set it to in Final Cut. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. That's pretty much all you need to know there. And now, when we come in, if you notice, we're going to go through and some clips have bars, some clips don't. This was the bane of my existence as I came in. And if you notice, the ones where I set the spatial conform to came in clean based on the timeline settings that I set it, and the ones that I didn't did not. Now, in the event that you do what I did and you do your entire movie incorrectly, here's how you fix it. Simply go control click, and what's nice is that Resolve now has an open in timeline command. So you can go select your clip and go down to the spatial conform settings and set those to fill inside your multicam. And basically, it's going to go ahead and fix that in the timeline. You get back by double-clicking the sequence there. And you can go through all of your clips. You can even map the open in timeline and command in Resolve. But you're going to have to do that if you have a lot of multicam and synchronized clips, which pretty much all narrative work does, and most narrative work that's going to come into Resolve if you're doing that. This is going to save you, this single tip will save you endless amounts of time in the latest version of DaVinci. Basically, the key to this whole thing is recognizing that Resolve and Final Cut both work from the same fundamental concept, which is that multicam clips are not multicam clips. They're just containers holding clips. So the way you set your spatial conform on the clip level is going to get respected as you go from Final Cut to Resolve. So if you want to make sure your sequences look and round trip back accordingly, you want to make sure that you set your clip settings identically so it's going to ripple through both applications. And that's really probably the biggest tip I can give you. Everything else is going to more or less get respected, but you're going to want to finalize auditions and break apart compound clips for the most part, because then you're going to have to go open in timeline and grade those, which you can do. So for instance, if I go and open in timeline here, and then I go to the color page, I only have one clip now. So I'm only going to be able to grade this clip. So you're going to, if you have a lot of compound clips, you're going to be constantly diving into timelines. If you break them apart and sort of respect things that way, it's going to work. So I'm almost out of time now, so I'm going to go ahead and bring Rory in, who's going to take everything I just showed you to a whole other level. And there are some really unique features that are in Resolve that very few of you guys know about. You know what? I'm just going to let him show it to you. But basically, the only other thing I'll tell you is when you do close out, when you go to deliver in Final Cut, there's a couple things you should know. They've made it way easier now, which is basically you're going to select Final Cut Pro 10 as the delivery tool. And you're going to use individual clips and set a couple other things as render. And I think, by the way, you're almost always going to want to keep Final Cut closed when you're in Resolve, because I think I broke a couple things just now. So with that in mind, I'm pretty much out of time. But if you guys have any other additional questions, come talk to me separately, and I can walk you through some additional info. And I'm going to turn this over to Rory, who's going to blow your minds with a couple things.